icons and drag them over like so. So we have there also select a group. Okay, I'm snapping to the grid, which is making it awkward. I'll tell you what, I'll align them to the underside of these here. Now that's 3 of those, but I could do with all of them in their hover states as well. So let's just make this same color as that. This will be the same color as that, and this will be the same color as well. So that gives us our hover states. Now it might also be a good idea if we copy those and we just take the icon elements as well. Now the reason that's useful is if we decide we're going to use CSS to build our buttons, we will need these icons, but it gives us a little bit more freedom with our background colors. We can even use CSS transitions to slowly fade the hover state in, which is more effective when you're just using hex colors in your CSS file. Okay, so that's dealt with. I'll tell you what, let's have a hover state for this one as well. Okay. Okay. Separate them slightly so there's no confusion. Alright, so we've got our logo, a couple of different buttons here. We've got our, oh, I know what we need to do. We need to grab this arrow and copy that. Again, that's 4. I can't even see it. Let's just colour that for the time being. That's if we want to use CSS to build that button after all. Okay, so that was really all we were going to deal with. Our background, as we discussed, we will need separate tile images for, because it's very difficult to use tiling on a CSS sprite sheet. You can really only tile across either the X or the Y axis. Tiling in both directions is impossible without including all your little bits and bobs in your background. So we've kind of made a jumbly kind of file there. We've got everything we need. We could be more efficient in terms of our layout, but it's not going to be a large file size, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to give that some more white space around it because we're going to need this whole area. Okay, I'll colour that white again, and now let's crop it like so. Don't need much around it. We'll make the background transparent by getting rid of the background. Now I'm going to save it. Let's just save it on my desktop there as a sprite PSD. And I'm also going to save the PNG just so we can see how large the file is. Sprite PNG. Okay. Not sure why that took so long. Okay, so if we close these, we'll now have sprite PSD, which is there. That's always useful to keep as an asset so that when you need to go back and edit your file, you have everything you need there. We could do with tidying that up in terms of the folder structure and everything, but I'll go back in there now and sort that out to save it in the downloads folder. This is our sprite PNG. It's 700 by 250 pixels, and if we look at the file size, it is a meager 33 KB. So that's fantastic, really. Okay. Now it's also worth noting that there are a couple of services available for automating some of this process. I open up my browser here, you see a couple of them here. Spriteme.org will trawl all the visual assets of any given web page and then compile them into a single sprite sheet for you. And then we have here spritecow.com, which will take any sprite sheet, analyze it, and output the various coordinates and dimensions of each graphic element. And this can save you some of the hard work when building your CSS file. Okay, it's time for some further reading. So let me just open up the presentation again. There we go. Take a look at this video tutorial by Tom Green. It looks at using sprite sheets when working with Fireworks and Dreamweaver. Now, before we jump into the next video, I have an assignment for you, as usual. I'd like you to repeat the process I just followed and build a sprite sheet of your own. You might want to do so in a slightly more organized fashion, saying that. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to begin our project by looking at organization. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to quickly look at project organization. We'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Well, we're going to look at common directory structure and then file naming conventions. Then I'll ask you to get your hands dirty with an assignment before we begin the next video. So let's first look at our project directory structure. There are conventions which are advisable, though not compulsory, to follow in order to make your life easier in the long run. Using common folder and file names will help if you or others ever need to work on your project further down the line. Let's look at a typical folder structure. We'll just leave our presentation here, and I have on my desktop a generic project folder here, my site, which contains nothing other than a blank index HTML file. If I just quickly open that up in Coda, you'll see that it consists of nothing other than a doc type declaration and the minimum tags necessary to begin a file. We'll discuss this later on though. Now we will also need various assets. We've already discussed our sprite PNG, for example, so we could just throw that in there. We'd also need CSS files, for example, maybe a reset CSS and a main CSS. I'll just dump those in there as well. But it could quickly get a bit messy and would be very unclear. So it's advisable to use various directories to separate all your content. A typical start would be a CSS or style sheet folder, whatever you like to call it. Remember, these are guidelines, they're not compulsory. But it is a naming convention, which makes it easier for other people to interpret your project. We would also likely need an image folder or images folder. There, our PNG sprite sheet would go in there, for example, and also likely a JavaScript or JS or behavior folder. That is fairly standard, and it's a great way to begin your project. Now, as mentioned, using common names will help others understand your work. If we go into our CSS folder here, I'm going to add a third CSS file in there. Now, using common, take these file names for example. It's clear what the purpose of each of these three CSS files is. We have a reset CSS, then we have a main CSS, and then we have this third blue theme CSS. It's clear what we're looking at there. If we were to have called these file 1, file 2, file 3, it would be very difficult to interpret how this project is built. Also, you should avoid using spaces within your file or folder names. Spaces can conflict in some situations, so stick to underscores or hyphens if necessary. You can also use camel case, such as this example, if that's your preference. Lastly, it's worth mentioning that you should zip it up. You'll find you often begin from the same starting point when you begin any web project, so why not make it easy for yourself and save time recreating this structure every occasion. Zip up the template so it's available every time you begin a project. You may find yourself adding to this template over time if you find there are some files like JavaScript or perhaps PHP that you commonly use. Now, I have no further reading for you as such, more of a recommendation. Check out this NetTuts file structure, which allows you to simply recreate directories and files without going through the normal process in whatever operating system you use. Now, before we jump into the next video, I have an assignment for you. Prepare your directory structure as we just did and zip it up ready for use with other projects further down the line. Next time on the 30 days to your first website design, we're going to choose our coding applications. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thank you for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 days to your first website design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to talk about code editors. We'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Well, we'll firstly look at what's needed in terms of the bare minimum of software. We'll then look at a few options, after which we'll take a look at our project so far. Lastly, as ever, once I've handed some further reading over to you, I'll set a small assignment. Now, when building a website, there are two things which you'll need as a bare minimum to get things going. You'll need a text editor to write your various bits of code in, and an FTP client, which is the program used to publish your files to the web server. That's it. You could therefore very easily use Notepad or text editor, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC, to write your files and then upload to your web space using, for example, FileZilla, a free and perfectly capable FTP client. I'll just drag that up for you now so you can see what I'm talking about. Here it is. This is FileZilla, and you'll notice here it has on the left side of the screen our local files. The activity will be shown in this window up at the top, and were it to be connected to a remote server, you would see the contents of the file and directory structure here. You'd then just have to literally drag and drop things left and right in order to move things from your local system to the web server. Now, there are plenty of FTP applications available, including Transmit here, another example, that's for the Mac. And there are also plugins for your browser, such as Fire FTP for Firefox. There we go, there's that one. And there are even fully blown apps available for the browser which take care of your editing, such as jsfiddle.net. You can edit in the various windows. Let's, for example, just give you a little look at what it does. We've got a little div in our HTML screen there, and we can add some CSS just to illustrate what's going on. There we go. And then we'll run that, and it appears in our rendering screen here. And you can also add JavaScript and various other bits and bobs there. Now, this is great for real-time experimenting. And there are also much more capable applications such as Code Anywhere. This is a service which requires subscription in order to have any real use, but this allows you to code, to edit, to FTP. It supplies file storage for you, and all online, so you don't even need anything on your own personal system. You can do it from wherever you are. Now we'll get rid of that. That's done and dusted. There are, of course, applications for your system, and you'll have undoubtedly heard of Dreamweaver. Some like TextMate for its simplicity. There's TextMate, very simple. And there are tons of others which I don't really have time to list, My choice is Coda for the Mac, and it deals with things much like many others, but I happen to like the interface. And there it is. It allows you to manage your projects locally. You can see the directory structure of our project, which is on my desktop, listed here in this structure tree. And it acts as an FTP client for uploading directly to the web once your editing is complete. And here you can see a remote copy of our files. Very straightforward. It also helps out with things like code hints, so it's great for that as well. Now, applications such as Coda are known as IDEs, or Integrated Development Environments, as they perform various functions for developing code-based projects. Now, I've made a start on our project. You remember we discussed the directory structure. That should look familiar to you. I've also prepared a background tile in our images folder here for our two textured areas. You can see that here. There's the dark version and the lighter version. Those are two PNG files. We have the sprite PNG. I'm going to drag this from my desktop and add that to our project here. And the images of our friendly staff. I'm going to drag those into the image folder as well. Now, anything that I do within the interface of Coda itself, you'll notice it pays attention to. It's noticed that more files have been added to the directory structure, and it's marked them for publication. So, having changed these, I can click Publish All or publish them all individually, and they'll shoot off straight to the web server. Fantastic, that's all dealt with. Of course, if we were saving and editing files directly in our folder through Finder or Windows, we'd have to take personal note of exactly what's been changed. So those are some additions. You'll notice, of course, that the HTML based document is looking a little more fleshed out. So let's just have a quick look at what we've added there. We'll begin with the head. Now this is the head of our document. I've added a title. That's new, I think. You'll notice I've also added two style sheets. We have our style CSS, which is in our our CSS folder in there. There it is. Now that's going to be where we do the body of our styling. We also have a reset CSS. There are various ways of adding a reset CSS if indeed you want to. This particular CSS file is hosted at Yahoo, and it serves perfectly to reset all the styles of any browser we're working in. So it basically means that your styles all begin from the same base, regardless of the browser. We have a favicon, which is a standard for any website. You can see Coda's using ours to highlight our website here. It's just a 20 by 20 pixel PNG file, whatever you like, be transparent as well. And we reference it here in the head in order to show it on our favorites or our bookmarks or in the browser as well, of course. Now lastly here, this is a conditional comment for Internet Explorer only. So this is basically saying, if you're looking at this website through Internet Explorer, I want you to pull in this script. Now this is a JavaScript, and it's known as the HTML5 shiv script, and it basically forces Internet Explorer to recognize HTML5 markup, such as this section, for example, the header, the nav. Those are all new semantic elements for HTML5, and earlier versions of Internet Explorer would have problems recognizing those. So this just deals with that. So that's our head. You'll notice I've built up, it looks more complicated than it is, a few sections. These are just literally sections. I'll tell you what, we'll jump into our PSD and I'll illustrate to you what those sections are. So we'll open up our PSD here. That was looking a bit messy, don't know what that was. Now we have our upper section here, our features. We have our contact section and our footer. So really what we're doing, I'm going to butcher our image here in order to illustrate what we're doing, is we are building from the top downwards in horizontal bands. We have the first band here, for example. We then have a second one here, a third one here. These are all going to be sections or divs or footer tags. The footer there. Now they're all fairly clear. I'm just going to make this slightly transparent so you can see through them. So those are going to be 4 clear sections in our markup. And we then have an additional wrapper within each one. So if I just highlight that by placing a wrapper there, and a wrapper there, and a wrapper there, and lastly on the footer, those are nested divs within our sections which are going to contain a load of other stuff. Now each of those wrappers is going to have a fixed width and is going to have an auto margin on each side in order to center it in the middle of our page. Each of those wrappers will also have padding top and bottom in order to just create a little bit of spacing on the top and the bottom of each area. So hopefully that's cleared up exactly what the markup means. If I bring it back up again, we can see, for example, we have our upper section. That's this one here, which is our intro. Now that contains our wrapper, which we just discussed, and there within the wrapper is the header, which has our logo and our primary navigation. Now at the moment, if we just preview that, the primary navigation hasn't been styled very much. It's just a list. We needed to, of course, if I go back to my PSD, have the primary navigation along the top right, like so. So we'll do that later on. You can also then see we have a section for our features where the team is, also one with a class of contact. That's the slightly darker area here, and a footer again with a wrapper div nested within it. Now we can take a look at the style CSS. We've firstly begun by declaring a few little bits of information just for our own administration, really, so we can remember when the file was edited, who's done it, what it's for, that sort of thing. That's always a good idea in your CSS files. We've begun with some basic styling with our HTML and our body elements, and then we covered the P elements, which is most of our body text, of course, the paragraphs, the font size, the line height, and a margin at the bottom of each paragraph, and we gave color and some basic styling to our anchor tags. Now the structure has been sorted out quite significantly, as you can see, with the backgrounds and the wrapper, but it really didn't take an awful lot to do that. The wrapper, as we discussed, is a width of 860 pixels with a padding left and right of 50. That's incorrect. That should have been top and bottom of 50 pixels, like so, with a margin of nothing top and bottom, and auto left and right in order to center that within each section. These are our sections. We have the intro, which has the background of the subtle freckles.ping. We'll remind ourselves looks like this. And then the features team section, which again has the same background, and then our contact background, which has the darker ping. And there we go. Plus a subtle border on top. We can see that in the preview, not in the preview of the CSS, of course, in the preview of our index HTML. You can see that there's a subtle dark border on the very top of our contact area, and we can preview that directly in the browser as well, of course. So that's a good begin. It looks pretty solid, and we can now begin to start filling all the areas in order to start making it look more like our PSD. Once again, if I save the style CSS there, I can publish that very simply in Coda. Okay, now it's time for some further reading, I think. So if I just jump back into the presentation, and there we go. To help you make your mind up where code editors are concerned, check out Andrew Burgess's 18 Wonderful IDEs for Windows, Mac and Linux. He outlines all the main contenders and lists the fundamental pros and cons of each. Now before we jump into the next video, I have an assignment for you. Having chosen your IDE, open up the project so far from the download files. Familiarize yourself with what's been done, because next time we're going to start fleshing out more of the web page using our basis. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to continue our coding and look at the web standards model. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thanks for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and we're now going to have a look at the web standards model. We'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to discuss what the web standards model is and why we strive to comply with it. We'll then take a look at our own project with regard to web standards. I'll then suggest some further reading as well as setting an assignment. Now, a few videos ago we glimpsed briefly at table-based layouts, what they were and why they were so dreadful. The web standards model aims to solve all the niggling problems manifested in table-based layouts, which typically included any styling in line, i.e. tangled up within the markup. By aiming to comply with web standards, by standardizing the way we build websites, we're making life easier for ourselves, but most importantly, making it clear for web browsers how they should treat our code. So what is this model of which I speak? Well, the standards model breaks aspects of web design into layers. There's structure, style, and behavior. And these are the fundamental components of any web project, and you'll be familiar with them in the form of HTML markup, which is your structure, CSS, which handles the styling, and JavaScript, which deals with any behavior on the front end of your web application. So why bother separating these three? What was wrong with the old methods? Well, there are several distinct advantages. Firstly, there's efficiency. By adhering to standards, you simply need much fewer lines of code. Ease of maintenance. Trawling through single bloated pages of illegible markup and repeated styling and lengthy JavaScript is just not pleasant. Then there's accessibility. Screen readers, for example, for people who are visually impaired, can read your page easily as the content isn't polluted by styling and scripting nonsense. Compatibility. By breaking your project into its composite elements, varying devices have a much better chance of rendering your web pages properly. You can even target individual devices using specific styling, for example. And then there's SEO. Standard compliant pages are easily crawled, understood, and the relevance therefore evaluated by search engine bots. Now let's take a look at our own project. We've covered the directory structure, but you should now have a clear idea of the reasoning behind the structure, like this. I'm just going to open this up in Coda again. So we had our index HTML, we had some basic structure, we introduced the head, and you can see that we had our styles referenced in CSS style sheets, and they're in a separate folder. So we've clearly in this structure managed to separate our structure, our styling, and our behavior. Now let's carry on a little bit with where we left off before we jump into the next video. I think it would probably be a good idea if I'm going to open this up in Google Chrome while we go, work a little bit on the testimonial area, our features area. So we'll add some markup. We've already got a small area here which is going to wrap our testimonials. So let's add some markup for the slides which are going to sit within that. First we'll add our slide itself.